The great hall of the Aurelian Empire was built to impress. Tall crystal pillars rose like frozen light toward a ceiling that looked like a painted night sky. Delegations from dozens of worlds stood in careful groups, wearing colors, metals, and fabrics that showed rank and power. Soft music filled the air, yet beneath it ran tension, thick and quiet. At the far end of the hall, separated from everyone else, stood Princess Vieira. She was tall and graceful, her silver-blue skin catching the light in a soft glow. Her eyes were calm, almost gentle, yet no one stood within several steps of her. Guards remained at a distance. Nobles avoided looking directly at her. Even trained diplomats felt uneasy when their gaze lingered too long. Everyone knew why. The princess carried an unseen pressure around her, a force no machine could fully explain. Any being who stayed too close for too long felt fear rise without reason. Hearts raced. Thoughts tangled. Some collapsed from panic. Others fled, shaken and ashamed. Over the years, many had tried to endure it. None had succeeded. Because of this, Vieira was known across the empire as the unreachable princess. She had never harmed anyone. She had never raised her voice or acted with cruelty. Yet she lived surrounded by empty space, as if the air itself warned others away. Suitors had come and gone. Political plans had failed again and again. Some whispered she was cursed. Others claimed she was dangerous. A few said she was broken. Vieira knew the truth was simpler. She was alone. She stood with her hands folded, her posture perfect, as she had been trained since childhood. Inside, however, she felt the familiar ache. Events like this always ended the same way. She would watch others laugh, form alliances, and make plans for the future, while hers remained frozen. Tonight's gathering was important. The empire faced growing uncertainty beyond its borders. New alliances were needed. New voices were invited. Among them was a relatively young species. Humans. Vieira had read the reports. Humans were physically unimpressive compared to many species present. No natural armor, no claws, no psychic gifts, and yet they were known for surviving worlds others had abandoned. They endured extremes of climate, conflict, and emotion that broke more advanced civilizations. Still, Vieira did not expect much. Across the hall, the human delegation stood modestly near a pillar. There were only a few of them. At their center stood a man in a simple, dark uniform. His posture was relaxed, his hands resting calmly at his sides. His name, according to the records, was Ethan Hale. Ethan was not a leader or a famous warrior. He was chosen as a representative because of his calm nature and experience working with alien cultures. To many in the hall, he looked painfully ordinary. Ethan scanned the room quietly, observing more than speaking. He noticed the subtle movements, the way groups shifted away from one area without seeming to do so. His eyes followed the pattern until he saw her, the princess. He felt it immediately, the pressure in the air, like standing too close to a strong storm. His chest tightened slightly. His instincts whispered caution. But beneath that, he sensed something else. Sadness. She stood alone, clearly meant to be the center of attention, yet treated like a fragile artifact no one dared touch. Ethan frowned. Not in fear, but in confusion. "Why is no one talking to her?" he asked quietly. A nearby diplomat stiffened. "Human, you should not approach the princess." Ethan glanced at him. "Why?" The diplomat hesitated. "For your safety." Ethan looked back at Vieira. She was watching the crowd with practiced calm, but her eyes flickered toward him for a brief moment. There was no threat in them, only curiosity and something like hope, quickly buried. Ethan made a decision. He stepped forward. The movement was small, but it sent a ripple through the hall. Conversations faltered. A few guards tensed. Someone whispered his species' name in alarm. Vieira noticed immediately. Her body reacted before her thoughts did. The familiar sensation surged outward, a reflex she had never been able to control. She braced herself, expecting the human to stop, to stumble. to turn away like all the others. But Ethan kept walking. With each step, the pressure grew stronger. His heart beat faster. A memory surfaced: long nights on a struggling colony world, helping others through fear and loss. He recognized the feeling. It was heavy. Yes, but not unbearable. When he stopped a respectful distance away, he let out a slow breath. Viola stared. No one had ever stood that close without showing distress. Yet the human stood straight, his expression calm, his eyes clear. He inclined his head slightly. "Princess Valeera," he said gently. "My name is Ethan Hale. I hope I'm not interrupting." Silence filled the hall. Valeera searched his face for signs of fear or strain. She saw none. Only patience. "You are not afraid," she said carefully. Ethan considered the feeling in his chest. "I feel something," he admitted. "But fear? No. More like standing near a strong wind." That answer stunned her more than anything else. "Others have called it pain," she said quietly. He shook his head. "I've felt worse." A few nobles shifted uneasily. The guards exchanged uncertain glances. This was not how things were supposed to go. Valeera felt something unfamiliar loosen inside her. Slowly, cautiously, she relaxed her stance just a little. "Why did you approach me?" she asked. Ethan did not answer right away. He looked around the hall, then back at her. "Because no one else would," he said simply. "And because you looked like you didn't want to be alone." For a moment, Valeera forgot where she was. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not as a princess. Not as a problem. Just as a person. They stood in silence, the pressure steady but no longer sharp. Ethan adjusted his breathing, unconsciously grounding himself. Valeera noticed and mirrored the motion, surprised to feel her own aura settle slightly. Across the hall, murmurs began. "The human is still standing. He hasn't collapsed. Is this a trick?" Scientists watching from observation platforms began recording data. Instruments showed fluctuations they could not explain. The princess's field was reacting but not violently. Valeera became aware of every eye on them. Old fear tried to return, urging her to withdraw, to protect others from herself. But Ethan remained, unmoving. "You may step away," she said softly. "I do not wish to harm you." Ethan met her gaze. "I'm all right," he said. "If you are." Something changed then. For the first time in her life, Valeera allowed herself to believe that the space around her did not have to be empty. The music slowly resumed. Conversations restarted, though quieter now, filled with disbelief. The human and the alien princess stood together, talking about simple things. His journey, the hall, the stars painted above. To the Empire watching, it was shocking. To Valeera, it was everything. And for Ethan Hale, it was just the beginning of something he did not yet understand but felt was important. Far beyond the hall, forces were already shifting. The galaxy had just witnessed a small, quiet act that would echo much louder than any display of power. A human had stepped forward, and the princess was no longer alone. The morning light over the Aurelian palace was soft and pale, filtering through wide crystal windows. Inside one of the upper halls, Princess Valeera stood near a balcony, looking out over the city below. From this height, the capital looked calm and beautiful, yet her thoughts were restless. For the first time in many years, her mind kept returning to the same moment. A human standing beside her, not collapsing, not fleeing, not forcing himself to endure but choosing to stay. The memory felt unreal, like something she might wake from at any moment. Behind her, quiet footsteps approached. Valeera sensed the familiar pressure shift as someone entered the hall. Normally, this was when guards stopped, when servants turned away. But the steps continued. She did not turn at once. She already knew who it was. "Good morning, Princess," Ethan Hale said politely. Valeera slowly faced him. He stood a respectful distance away, his hands visible, his posture relaxed. There was no tension in his expression, no fear hiding behind trained discipline. He looked the same as he had the night before, calm, steady, present. "You came back," she said, unable to hide her surprise. Ethan nodded. "I was invited." That alone was enough to unsettle her. People did not return once they felt her presence. One encounter was usually enough. "You understand what it means to be here," she said carefully. "My condition has not changed." "I understand," Ethan replied. "And I'm still all right." She studied him closely. The pressure around her rose slightly, as if testing him. Ethan felt it press against his thoughts like heavy air, but he adjusted his breathing and let the sensation pass through him instead of fighting it. Violara noticed. "You adapt," she said quietly. "I've had practice," he answered. They stood there for a moment, watching the city. Violara realized something else that was new and unsettling. She did not feel ashamed. Later that day, the palace was full of quiet movement. Scientists, physicians, and advisors gathered in observation chambers. No one interfered directly, but everything was watched. Sensors tracked energy patterns. Medical devices monitored Ethan's vital signs with his permission. The readings confused them. Ethan's heart rate rose near the princess, but it stabilized quickly. His brain activity showed stress, but controlled, organized stress. The kind that came from focus, not panic. "This makes no sense," one scientist muttered. "He should be overwhelmed." "He should," another agreed. "But he isn't." Ethan and Violara were guided into a wide garden, enclosed by transparent walls. Soft alien plants glowed gently around them. This environment was designed to reduce external stress, but it had never changed the effect of Valera's presence before. They walked slowly along a curved path. "Are they always watching you like this?" Ethan asked. "Yes," Valera replied. "I have never been alone. Only isolated." Isolated. Ethan considered that. "Those aren't the same thing." She looked at him sharply. "Most beings think they are." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Being alone is about distance," he said. "Being isolated is about being unseen." The words struck deeper than she expected. Valera looked away, her fingers tightening slightly. "People see me." "They see what they fear," Ethan replied gently. "Not who you are." No one had ever challenged that truth aloud. They continued walking. With time, Valera noticed something else that startled her even more. The pressure around her felt quieter. Not weaker, but steadier. It did not spike with emotion, as it usually did. Ethan noticed it too. "It's different today," he said. "Yes," she admitted. "It is responding to you." That revelation sent unease through the observing chambers. Over the next few days, Ethan remained in the palace. Each session lasted longer than the last. He stood beside Valera during meals, meetings, and quiet walks. He listened when she spoke of history, of duty, of the constant effort to control something no one had taught her to understand. In return, Ethan spoke of Earth, of storms and crowded cities, of loss, recovery, and learning to function even when fear never fully leaves. "Humans feel fear often," he said once. "But we don't treat it as a signal to stop living. Just a signal to be careful." Valera absorbed every word. Not everyone was pleased. Members of the High Council began to argue behind closed doors. Some saw hope, others saw danger. "If humans can approach the princess," one counselor said, "they gain influence over the throne. Or she gains freedom," another replied. Outside the council chambers, rumors spread. Some guards avoided Ethan, others watched him with open suspicion. A few alien nobles whispered that the human must be manipulating her. Ethan noticed the tension but did not comment. One evening, during a formal gathering, the pressure in the room suddenly spiked. Valera staggered slightly, her control slipping under the weight of attention and expectation. Conversations froze as nobles stepped back instinctively. Ethan moved without thinking. He stepped closer, placing himself between her and the crowd, not touching her, just being there. He spoke quietly, grounding his voice. "Breathe," he said. "Slow. I'm here." Valera focused on him. His steady presence acted like an anchor. Her aura settled, smoothing instead of flaring outward. The panic faded. The room was silent. The princess straightened. "Thank you," she said softly. For many watching, the moment changed everything. That night, Valeera stood alone in her private chamber, staring at her reflection. She looked the same as she always had, but inside, something fundamental had shifted. For the first time, her future did not feel sealed by fear. Across the palace, Ethan sat alone in his assigned quarters. He reviewed reports sent from Earth. Human scientists were just as confused as the alien ones. One message stood out. "You are not immune," it read. "You are compatible." Ethan leaned back, exhaling slowly. He realized then that this was bigger than one princess, or one empire. Humanity's ability to endure emotional weight to function inside pressure, instead of collapsing, was something the galaxy had never truly measured, and now it was being seen. The next morning, a formal announcement echoed through the palace. The human representative would remain as official liaison to Princess Valeera. Some celebrated. Others feared what it meant. Valeera heard the announcement and smiled faintly. She was no longer the princess no one dared approach. And Ethan Hale, an ordinary human by galactic standards, had become the one person who could stand where no one else could. Neither of them yet knew how dangerous that truth would become. But the galaxy was starting to pay attention. The atmosphere inside the Aurelian palace changed after the announcement. Princess Valeera felt it in the air before anyone spoke of it. Where there had once been quiet fear, there was now tension. Eyes followed her, and Ethan everywhere they went. Some held hope, others held resentment. Ethan noticed it too. During their walks through the palace corridors, guards stood straighter. Advisors whispered behind closed doors. Conversations stopped when they entered a room. The human had become a variable no one had planned for. Valeera walked beside him, her posture calm. But her thoughts were troubled. "They are afraid," she said quietly one afternoon as they stood in a high observatory overlooking the stars. "Of you?" Ethan asked. "Of what you represent," she replied. "And what it means for me." Ethan rested his hands on the railing. Change usually scares people more than danger does. She nodded slowly. "They will test us." She was right. The tests began subtly. Longer public appearances were scheduled, crowded halls, extended council sessions filled with emotional debate, situations designed to overwhelm her control. In the past, such pressure would have caused her aura to surge uncontrollably, forcing everyone away. This time, Ethan remained. Each session pushed him further. The pressure pressed harder against his thoughts, stirring old memories of fear, loss, and responsibility. But he did not fight it. He let it exist, steadying himself the way humans had learned to do for generations. Valeera watched him closely. "You are under strain," she said one evening after a long council meeting. "Yes," Ethan admitted, "but it's manageable." She hesitated. "You should not have to bear this." He looked at her gently. "You've been bearing it alone your entire life." The words stayed with her. Not all threats were quiet. Beyond the Empire's borders, a rival power had been watching closely. They had long believed the Aurelian throne was vulnerable because of its isolated princess. Now, they saw something new and unsettling. A bond. If the princess could be stabilized, guided, or supported, her influence would grow. That could not be allowed. The warning came late in the evening. Sensors detected an unidentified vessel entering restricted space. Palace security went on alert. Advisors rushed through halls. Guards took positions. Valeera felt the shift instantly. Fear rippled through the palace, feeding into her aura. She staggered slightly, the familiar loss of control threatening to return. Ethan was already at her side. "Stay with me," he said calmly. The pressure surged, sharper than before. This was not just social stress, it was real danger. "They will panic," Valeera said, her voice strained. "If I lose control." "You won't," Ethan said firmly. "I'm here." They were escorted to a secure command chamber overlooking the capital's defense grid. Large displays showed the unknown vessel holding position just outside the planetary shield. Council members argued loudly. "This is exactly why the human should not be here." The princess is unstable under threat. Remove them from the chamber. The noise fed the pressure. Violira clenched her fists, trying to contain it. The room began to feel heavy, oppressive. Several advisors backed away instinctively. Ethan stepped forward, placing himself directly in front of her, blocking her view of the chaos. "Look at me," he said quietly. Valera focused on his face. His expression was steady, his breathing controlled. She mirrored it, slowly matching his rhythm. The pressure did not vanish, but it stopped growing. The room fell silent. "What is happening?" one counselor whispered. Sensors confirmed it. Valera's psychic field was no longer expanding outward. It was stabilizing around a fixed point. Ethan, the hostile vessel, transmitted a message moments later. It was not a demand or a threat, but a test, an attempt to provoke fear and disorder. The Empire did not respond immediately. Instead, Valera straightened. "Open a channel," she said. Gasps echoed through the chamber. "No ruler has ever allowed her to speak directly under stress," someone protested. "She is not alone," another replied softly. The channel opened. Valera spoke with calm clarity, her voice steady for the first time during a crisis. Ethan remained beside her, silent but present. The hostile vessel withdrew after a brief exchange. Whatever they had hoped to see, they had not found it. When the danger passed, the room exhaled as one. Violira closed her eyes, exhaustion washing over her. Ethan felt it too, the delayed weight of everything he had held at bay. Guards approached, uncertain. "Princess?" one asked carefully. She opened her eyes and smiled faintly. "I am well." The medical teams confirmed it. No uncontrolled surge. No panic collapse. For the first time in recorded history, the princess had faced an external threat without isolating herself. That night, Valera and Ethan sat in a quiet chamber overlooking the city lights. "I was afraid," she admitted. "So was I," Ethan said. She looked at him in surprise. "You did not show it." He shrugged slightly. "Fear doesn't have to be hidden. It just doesn't have to be obeyed." Valera considered that deeply. "Then I have been listening to fear my whole life," she said. "Not anymore," he replied. Across the Empire, the story spread quickly. The princess was not cursed. The human was not immune. They were compatible. Scientists finally began to understand. Valera's aura was not a weapon or a flaw, it was an amplified emotional resonance. Most species lacked the mental framework to remain functional within it. Humans, shaped by constant emotional extremes, could adapt. They did not resist the pressure. They carried it. The realization shook the High Council. Humanity was not weak. They were resilient in ways the galaxy had never measured. As dawn rose over the capital, Valera stood once more on her balcony. Ethan stood beside her, the city stretching below them. "For the first time," she said softly, "I do not fear what comes next." Ethan smiled slightly. "That's good, because the galaxy just noticed you." She glanced at him. "And you." He met her gaze. "We'll face it together." Far beyond the planet, messages were already spreading. Alliances shifted. Powers reconsidered their assumptions. A princess once avoided by all had stood firm in crisis. And a single human had shown the galaxy that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to stand anyway. The final test was still ahead, but neither of them would face it alone. The final council session was announced at sunrise. Across the Aurelian Empire, the news spread quickly. Delegations from many worlds gathered again in the Great Hall. Not out of ceremony this time, but expectation. What had happened during the recent threat could not be ignored. For the first time in history, Princess Valera had faced danger without being isolated. And she had done so with a human at her side. Valera stood in her private chamber, preparing for the session. Her hands were steady, though her thoughts moved quickly. This meeting would decide more than policy. It would decide her future. Ethan waited nearby, giving her space. He had learned when to speak and when to simply be present. "You do not have to stand with me today," Valera said softly without turning. "The council will question everything, including you," Ethan answered calmly. "Then I should be there." She faced him. "Why?" He thought for a moment. Because walking away now would make everything we've done meaningless. She studied his face, searching for doubt. She found none. Together, they entered the great hall. The reaction was immediate. Whispers spread. Some delegates leaned forward with interest. Others stiffened with unease. The space around Vieira was no longer empty, but it was no longer wide either. People stood closer than before, watching carefully. Ethan felt the pressure as soon as they stepped inside. It was stronger than usual. This hall carried history, fear, and expectation all at once. He adjusted his breathing, grounding himself the way he always did. Vieira noticed and matched him. The council members took their places. The high speaker rose. Princess Vieira, the speaker said, and human liaison Ethan Hale. This council convenes to decide matters of state, truth, and future. Silence followed. For generations, the speaker continued, the princess has been isolated for the safety of the empire. Recent events challenge everything we believed. A counselor stood. What we witnessed was dangerous, they said. One mistake, one emotional surge, and lives could have been lost. Another rose immediately. What we witnessed was control, stability, growth. Voices overlapped. The pressure in the hall increased as emotions rose. Vieira felt it building inside her. The old instinct to withdraw, trying to take hold. She did not step back. Ethan shifted slightly closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel his presence clearly. Vieira lifted her chin. I wish to speak, she said. The hall fell silent. I have been called a danger, she continued. A curse. A risk to those around me. Yet I have never chosen this power. Nor have I ever wished harm upon anyone. She paused, letting the truth settle. For years, fear has shaped my life. Not my own fear, but the fear of others. Murmurs spread, but she continued. What has changed is not my condition. What has changed is understanding. She gestured slightly toward Ethan. Humans endure emotional pressure differently. They do not flee from it. They adapt. They remain present. A counselor frowned. Are you saying the human controls you? Vieira answered firmly. No. He stands with me. There is a difference. Ethan felt a quiet warmth at her words. The high speaker raised a hand. Scientific findings have been reviewed. They said, the princess's aura is not hostile by nature. It reacts to fear and instability. With emotional grounding, it stabilizes. Another counselor spoke hesitantly. Then, she was never dangerous? No, the speaker replied. We were. The admission sent a ripple through the hall. Vieira felt something inside her loosen, an old weight finally lifted. The final vote was called. Not on isolation, not on containment, but on choice. The decision was unanimous. Princess Vieira would no longer be secluded. She would represent the empire openly, with Ethan Hale remaining at her side by mutual consent, not obligation. When the vote was announced, the hall erupted not in fear, but applause. Vieira closed her eyes briefly, overwhelmed. Ethan felt the pressure ease for the first time since they met. Later that evening, the palace balconies glowed under the stars. The city below shimmered with light. Vieira stood beside Ethan, the vast sky stretching before them. I am free, she said softly, as if testing the words. Ethan smiled. You always were. Now others see it. She turned to him. You could return to Earth now. Your duty is complete. He looked at the stars, then back at her. I don't think it is. She studied him carefully. Why do you stay? Ethan answered honestly. Because you shouldn't have to face what comes next alone. And because I don't want to leave. For a moment, the princess said nothing. Then she nodded slowly. Then stay, she said. Not as my guard, not as my anchor, but as my partner. Ethan felt the weight of the moment, not fear, but responsibility chosen freely. I will, he said. The following days reshaped the galaxy. Messages spread quickly. The Aurelian Empire announced a new era of diplomacy, one built on understanding emotional strength, not hiding from it. Other species watched closely. Some reached out to humanity with curiosity, others with caution. Humanity's reputation changed. They were no longer seen as fragile or primitive. They were seen as resilient, as beings who could stand inside pressure and still choose kindness. For Valeira, life changed in quieter ways. She walked among her people. She spoke without fear. Children waved instead of hiding. Guards smiled instead of tensing. Her aura did not vanish. It no longer needed to. One evening, as the sun set over the capital, Valeira and Ethan walked through the palace gardens. Soft lights glowed among the plants. The air was calm. "I used to believe I was alone by nature," Valeira said. "That I was meant to stand apart. And now?" Ethan asked. "Now, I know I was simply waiting," she replied. "For someone willing to step forward." Ethan chuckled softly. "I almost didn't." She raised an eyebrow. "What stopped you?" "Fear," he admitted. She smiled gently. "And yet you came." "Yes," he said. "Because fear doesn't always mean stop. Sometimes it means this matters." They stopped walking and looked out over the city together. Far away, other worlds watched, other empires debated, but in that quiet moment, none of it mattered. A princess once avoided by all, now stood at the heart of her people. A human once considered ordinary had changed history without raising a weapon. Together, they had proven something the galaxy would never forget. True strength was not domination. It was endurance. It was empathy. And sometimes, it was simply the courage to step forward when everyone else stepped.